lecture.
Prabhu, just a humble request. If it is okay for you, you can make me or anyone else co-host, so we can also let others in. So during lecture, you don't have to take a look on those things. It's a humble request.
Yes, thank you very much. That is a very good proposal. I think Nika Shavanti could be, since she's, she is has enough practice. Let me see, co-host. Yes, now she's a co-host. So we are reading from the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. Chapter 4 of the Bhagavad-gita is called Transcendental Knowledge. So it's all about knowledge. And we are talking about text 23, which I will be sharing with you via my screen. So I suppose you should be seeing this. And I don't know how I can... anyway, this is the verse which we are talking about today, and I will be reading the Sanskrit, the translation, and the purport. We'll also be dealing with the synonyms, or the actually synonyms is not the right word. It should be equivalents, English equivalents, and then we'll be talking about that also during the lecture. So the verse goes as follows: gata-saṅgasya muktasya jñānāvasthita-cetasaḥ yajñāyācarataḥ karma samagram pravilīyate. The translation goes as follows: the work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. And the brief purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada: becoming fully Kṛṣṇa conscious, one is freed from all dualities and thus is free from the contaminations of the material modes. He can become liberated because he knows his constitutional position in relationship with Kṛṣṇa, and thus his mind cannot be drawn from Kṛṣṇa consciousness. Consequently, whatever he does for Kṛṣṇa, who is the primeval Vishnu. Therefore, all his works are technically sacrifices, because sacrifice aims at satisfying the Supreme Person, Vishnu, Kṛṣṇa. The resultant reactions to all such work certainly merge into transcendence, and one does not suffer material effects. So again, the translation: the work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yatkripa tamaham vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. So the translation here, we see the work of a man who is unattached. So we could say the work of a person, of a human being, because man in this case just means human, is not gender specific. It's not only related to men or women or any specific gender identity. It just means the work of a person, of a human being who is unattached to the modes of material nature, which means the 3 gunas, sattva guna, raja guna, and tamaguna, and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge. We should bear in mind that the chapter name is transcendental knowledge. So here we have the topic of the chapter again, transcendental knowledge, merges entirely into transcendence. So what merges? It's not the man, but it's the work of, it's not the person, not the human being, but the work which merges into transcendence. So it means that due to the transcendental knowledge and the fact that this person is not under the influence, under the direct influence of the 3 gunas, the activities of such a person become transcendental. So these are no longer material activities. And we may wonder, as I said, we will be talking about the equivalents, the English equivalents for the Sanskrit words. We may wonder what the original Sanskrit text says. And we see here, yes, we see of one unattached to the modes of material nature. We find that at the beginning of the sentence. Liberated, muktasya. So yeah, we don't find the word liberated here in the translation. Jñāna-avasthita. Jñāna actually is knowledge, so situated in transcendence. So transcendence and knowledge, obviously transcendental knowledge. Then we have wisdom, and then we have for the sake of yajña. By the way, some people pronounce it yajña, some people pronounce it yajña. So there are different ways of pronouncing this word. There are literally different schools of thought, different teachings, and depending on what your mother tongue is, you will pronounce Sanskrit differently. Even people in India, they will not necessarily have the pure original pronunciation of Sanskrit. That is why you will sometimes hear people pronounce it yajña. That is mostly Hindi speakers. They will pronounce yajña. Western scholars will pronounce it yajña. There is a very well-known devotee, an ISKCON member, who's also a well-acknowledged and respected Sanskrit scholar. His name is Revati Raman Prabhu, and he says that he would settle for yajña. So that's why I'm using this pronunciation variety or variant for this word. So, and I'll be using this word a bit more often during the lecture, so don't be surprised. So for the sake of yajña, so we don't find yajña in the translation here. There is no mention of sacrifice. It doesn't say so, but it's mentioned here in the verse. And karma, we find karma, the work, which is here in the beginning, the work of a man. And I have looked at other translations of the Bhagavad-gita, namely one of what we would call a Mayavadi, a follower of Shankaracharya. And his translation is very much different. His translation says that you will be, not that the work merges entirely into transcendence, but he says that the work of a man, it becomes free from karma. Free from karma is a very different concept. So I'll just stop sharing the screen. I'm back again. So karma, actually, being free from karma is not necessarily the same as transcendental. Transcendental means it gives you a benefit. You will have spiritual benefit, which is eternal. Free from karma just means free from karma. You want to, for example, if you want to take a bath in the Ganges, in the Ganga, it will free you from all bad karma. That is what it says. But it is even better to bathe in the Yamuna, because the Yamuna will also take away the good karma. So you're free from all karma, which is a good platform to start with. So still, it's not entirely fully spiritual if you don't have any karma, because yeah, how will that help you approach the Supreme? So in this part of the Bhagavad-gita, in the first section of the Bhagavad-gita, Kṛṣṇa and Arjuna discuss the history, the identity crisis of Arjuna. It's as if Arjuna has an amnesia. He's completely, his mind is blank. He doesn't know what to talk, what to think, what to do. He's so full of questions, which is very beneficial for us, but he was certainly very confused. And so Kṛṣṇa had to tell him, okay, you have this and that duty. The third chapter, for example, Karma Yoga, establishes what kind of duties people have, what kind of occupation you should have, what kind of spiritual job, so to say, you should have. And now this chapter, chapter 4, is more detailed in the sense that Kṛṣṇa talks about himself. He also talks about, as the title says, about transcendental knowledge. And it is as if Kṛṣṇa is like a new professor or a new teacher. When you, as a university student, for example, you sit in class and then you get a new professor and he introduces himself, and then he will say, yes, my name is such and such. I have taught at this and that university, and the topics that I have taught or the coursework that I have taught was this and this and this. So Kṛṣṇa does the same in a certain way. He gives his credentials. He says, yeah, I have here some transcendental knowledge, and it's very relevant. It's very proven. And you're not the first one to receive it. Vivasvan has been taught this knowledge, and he was first in line, so to say, and you're not the first one. So there has already been someone who has received this knowledge, and it's very relevant. So Arjuna learns in this chapter how to work. Not just what to work, but how to work. And in this verse, we see that you should be unattached to the modes of nature. So that means you shouldn't be under the influence of sattva guna, the mode of goodness, raja guna, the mode of passion, and tama guna, the mode of ignorance. And at the end of this chapter, which we will be dealing with in the coming weeks, I don't know, I think we have, I think 10 more verses to go. Yeah, so in the next 10 weeks, we will be hearing more about that. And at the end, the last 2 verses of the 4th chapter, they will deal with doubts. So doubt can be alleviated with the help of knowledge. So Kṛṣṇa speaks in this chapter a lot. There is only one verse which is Arjuna's statement, Arjuna's question, and the whole rest of the 4th chapter is Kṛṣṇa giving Arjuna transcendental knowledge. So I have talked about the fact that we have in this verse, or for this verse, a translation which is a bit different from the Sanskrit. And I've also mentioned that I have seen a Mayavadi interpretation or Mayavadi translation of this verse, which is different from our translation. Now we have to understand that Srila Prabhupada didn't just make the translation up, and he didn't, especially the purport is not just made up. It's not from his own mind, but he had the purports of previous acharyas who have given their verdict and who have given their opinion on the verses of the Bhagavad-gita and on the verses of the Bhagavatam as well. So the fact that the translation is not very, how should I say, not very faithful in one sense, is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, because you can translate sentences. You can translate sentences and texts differently, and it would still be correct. Now I've been requested to share my screen again. I can do that. We are talking about text 23. What I'm showing you right now is text 24, which will be Sutapa Prabhu will be talking about next week. And by the way, the week after that we'll have Tulsi and Pandava, and the week after that we'll have Sanatani, who will be talking about the subsequent verses, which are also very relevant verses. So text 24, I'm showing you briefly, you have the word Brahma 6 times in this verse, and yeah, you can see Srila Prabhupada has translated this as Krishna consciousness. Krishna, who is a person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, whereas it just says here spiritual, something spiritual, because we have Brahma 6 times, but out of Brahma, whichever one he used for Krishna consciousness, it actually means just spiritual energy, or the Brahman energy, the spiritual effulgence, or something. Here, Brahma is spiritual kingdom, Brahma is spiritual, Brahma can be the supreme. So yeah, Krishna consciousness, it is as if, now I'm going back to today's verse. So how does Prabhupada do that? Why does he write Krishna consciousness instead of, let's say, spiritual consciousness? Why does he write transcendence? And why does he not mention that the work becomes just free of karma? So because Srila Prabhupada has the vision of the acharyas. It is, we once had a lecturer at university. She was also trying to teach us the terminology of law and the thinking of law, which means that in order to understand how law works, how laws are phrased, how contracts are phrased, you need to understand how people with this law-centered mind are thinking. And she said, well, you need to put on the glasses of a judge, or the glasses of a lawyer. So you have to see everything through the lens of that. And yeah, so then she asked us, what do you do when you wake up first thing in the morning? And then we were guessing, what does she mean? Like brushing our teeth, or, well, getting up, getting out of bed, I don't know, opening the door, something like that. And then she said, yeah, what I actually meant is you switch on the light. If it's dark, you will switch on the light. And then we still didn't know what she meant. And then she explained, well, if you switch, you have a contract with your electricity provider. If you switch on the light, it means you are consuming electricity, and the meter of your electricity meter will start running, or will be running faster, because you probably have some other devices that consume electricity. But at that time, you increase your electricity consumption, and that means that you will have to pay for it at the end, because you have a contract. So that is how you see things through the perspective of, let's say, a lawyer. An electrician will see it differently. An ordinary person will see it as a very ordinary act, but switching on the light is an interesting act from the point of view of a lawyer or a law expert. And also, if the wiring is faulty and then you have a fire in your apartment, then you have another legal liability issue, which is another legal problem. So when we see that Prabhupada and other acharyas translate Sanskrit verses a bit differently, or through seeing them through their own eyes, it doesn't mean that the translation is wrong. There is a translation scholar, Christiane Norci. I remember, she might not be that famous, but I do remember that I had to read one of her essays during my university studies. And she said that translations have to be faithful. Now, faithful to the text, faithful to the author of the text, faithful to the reader of the text, so that you have a loyalty issue, or loyalty aspect that comes into play. And certainly, if you translate the Sanskrit verses in this sense, that everything is seen in connection with Kṛṣṇa, in the personal aspect of the Supreme, then you will have a very strong loyalty towards the author of the text in this case, because it was Kṛṣṇa who spoke this text. And if Kṛṣṇa speaks about those things about spirituality and jñāna, knowledge that he speaks, and yajña, the sacrifice for yajña or Kṛṣṇa, then it is completely legitimate to translate it in that way and to see it through the eyes of a personalistic view. So there you have the loyalty issue solved, and when a Mayavadi person translates this differently, he of course owes it to his spiritual upbringing, so to say, and to his acharyas, but it is not necessarily a faithful translation if we consider the author of the text. So, and you will find this everywhere in the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad-gita. There are some, I'm not saying it's different, but seeing the translations are translations and purports that are made from the point of view of a follower of the personalistic view of a not a Mayavadi, but someone who is a worshipper of the personal form of Kṛṣṇa. And so that is legitimate. So yeah, we see here yajña. So as I'm already sharing my screen with you, I'll be showing you yajña, because yajña, it just means sacrifice, but when we talk about Vedic sacrifice or in terms of spirituality, we have yajñas like this one. That is a big yajña in Mayapur. I think, yeah, there's not much happening. There's someone throwing wood into the fire, and there is well, the big fire surrounded by people. Someone is chanting very loudly mantras and prayers, and it is people here who chant or recite mantras, recite prayers and hymns, and make offerings of ghee. You see a man here with a pot of ghee, and he is putting ghee into the fire occasionally. And also the others, they are throwing grains and other objects, something into the fire. I don't know exactly what, but yeah, there you see it. They have this movement of hand. They throw something into the fire, and it's basically the same throughout. You can see a big fire. Sometimes it's a bit smaller, but yeah, that is actually what you would consider a yajña. So what is a yajña? A yajña means, I'm showing you another yajña now. You can see already the title of the video, which I'll be showing you. This is not a celebrity talk show, but not entertainment news, but there is a reason why I'm showing you that. So yajña, it means sacrifice, or sometimes it's ritual. And you have just seen a ritual that is supposed to create auspicious circumstances and give protection. That is why it's called Narasimha Yajña, because it is a yajña for Lord Narasimha Dev. And there are different kinds of yajñas. Also, you will, for example, see wedding yajña or wedding ceremony, which in India takes several days. Now, you may see here the title of the video includes the name Ambani. Ambani, the Ambani family is one of the wealthiest families in India. And Isha Ambani is the daughter of Mukesh Ambani, and he is probably by now at least among the top 3 of the richest people in India, and he is really a multi-billionaire. And this wedding for his daughter cost $100 million. So you can spend a lot of money on a yajña. So you see that there is a band, they are singing, then you have all this glittering jewelry, and you see a little yajña in the center. Still, they have maintained their tradition. They have this Vedic sacrifice. They are circumambulating the yajña, and they are also offering something small into the fire. And you see there are all kinds of things. You have the different pujaris. You could just see someone, there are different, if you look very closely, you can see they have different tilaks because they represent different sampradayas, different schools. There's also one, probably one ISKCON Pujari here at the back. He does have a Gaudiya Vaishnava tilak, and I do know that they have some maybe superficial, maybe not so superficial connection to ISKCON. They had invited Radhanath Swami, among others. And yeah, you see all of that, and it's all glittery and nice and beautiful. And Hillary Clinton was there, by the way, and then you have all of that. So that is Indian entertainment, but I'm showing you that for a reason, because there are different kinds of yajñas that you can perform. And this would probably fall into the category of karma kanda. I'm not saying it's bad. So it does invoke auspicious circumstances. It gives the blessings of the people who are attending the wedding, but it also gives the blessings of the demigods and higher personalities and so on, which is a good thing. You shouldn't go without blessings. But sometimes, of course, you can get can get over the top, spending $100 million on a wedding. Maybe if you have that money, and from an economical point of view, it's good, because money gets spent, people earn some money. All those jewelry manufacturers and flower providers and so on, they earned a bit of money. So we have in the Srimad Bhagavatam one incident that is described in a purport by Srila Prabhupada, and this is in the 6th canto, 3rd chapter, text 25 of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And this verse, it speaks about yajñas, and I'll briefly read that one, because they are bewildered by the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yajñavalkya and Jaimini and other compilers of the religious scriptures cannot know the secret confidential religious system of the 12 Mahajanas. They cannot understand the transcendental value of performing devotional service or chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, because their minds are attracted to the ritualistic ceremonies mentioned in the Vedas, especially the Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Rigveda. Their intelligence has become dull. Thus, they are busy collecting the ingredients for ritualistic ceremonies that yield only temporary benefits, such as elevation to Svargaloka for material happiness. They are not attracted to the Sankirtan movement. Instead, they are interested in Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. So, and if we look at the verse, we have Madhu Pushpitayang. Pushpa means flower. So it's in the flowery Vedic language describing the results of ritualistic performances. That's how Prabhupada translates this here. And in the performance, we have here Vaitanike, in the performances mentioned in the Vedas. And as you see here, mentioned in the Vedas, we have that here in the translation, but this edition, especially in the Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Rigveda, is an edition that Srila Prabhupada has made, also based on the knowledge that he has, and based on the tradition that he comes from. Because if you are a representative of a tradition, you can also give a little bit of explanation. You can expand, so to say, the translation. And we know that these 3 books, or these 3 Vedas, have contain the what is needed for performing a yajña. So I read that during a yajña there should be 4 people representing the 4 Vedas, and each one should be chanting something from one of the Vedas, especially here Yajurveda, Samaveda, Rigveda. But why am I showing you this? It is because firstly, it shows why people are so attracted to yajñas and sacrifices. Srila Prabhupada writes here, one may ask why there are so many Vedic ritualistic ceremonies and why people are attracted to them. This verse answers that question. And he also mentions here huge amounts of money spent for such ceremonies. And yes, people spend a lot of money on weddings in India. There have been attempts to outlaw opulent weddings. Some want to oblige people to keep weddings small, which during the COVID pandemic was, also a health concern. But yeah, I don't know if that really worked. I saw a picture from India where two people completely covered in a PPE suit, personal protective equipment, were garlanding each other like with masks and everything, covered in this funny suit, and they got married. They could have waited maybe for the situation to subsist, but anyway, to subside. But yeah, they wanted to get married and they were keen on getting married, so they did it in the PPE. Why not? But yeah, here we see huge amounts of money spent for such ceremonies. Sometimes we have to observe the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies to please such unintelligent men. Now he refers to a certain incident which happened in Vrindavan just right after that statement. He says, recently, that was in the 1970s, when we established a large Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan, we were obliged to have Vedic ceremonies enacted by Brahmanas because the inhabitants of Vrindavan, especially the Smarta Brahmanas are Brahmanas that follow a certain path that includes a certain set of rituals. And it says in their philosophy that following those rituals will give them a certain result. And it is a requirement that you have to follow the rituals in a certain way so that you will be in a certain way automatically eligible for the desired results. The inhabitants of Vrindavan, especially the Smarta Brahmanas, would not accept Europeans and Americans as bona fide Brahmanas. Thus, we had to engage Brahmanas to perform costly yajñas. In spite of these yajñas, the members of our society performed kirtan loudly with mridangas, and I consider the Sankirtan more important than the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. Both the ceremonies and the Sankirtan were going on simultaneously. The ceremonies were meant for persons interested in Vedic rituals for elevation to heavenly planets, whereas the Sankirtan was meant for pure devotees interested in pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he speaks about being obliged to follow these yajñas, although he wasn't really keen on having them. He would have preferred to just have a kirtan because that counts as installation of the deities. We would simply have performed Sankirtan, but then the inhabitants of Vrindavan would not have taken the installation ceremony seriously. So it was out of social convention that he had those rituals performed. And it was reported that he invited Brahmanas, priests from the local community, to discuss the installation ceremony. And his disciples, Prabhupada's disciples, Europeans and Americans, they had prepared some prasadam. And these priests refused to eat that prasadam because, well, according to their tradition, Smarta tradition, you cannot eat anything cooked by an impure person. And they considered the Europeans and Americans impure because they were born in the wrong country. So there is, of course, a certain implication that comes when you are born in America or in Europe. You are born into a certain society, into a certain culture. You have a certain environment, certain people that surround you, a certain kind of upbringing. And that is not necessarily conducive for spiritual life, especially if we look at the current situation in Europe. People are not very spiritual. They are very much materialistic. Some 200 years ago, people had a bit more of decency, but still I personally would not have liked to be born in that area, in that time, in that era. We as people of the modern times have a bit more freedom, but we have a lot of freedom to satisfy or to gratify our senses. So that is why Europeans and Americans would not be accepted as bona fide brahmanas. Now, that is why Srila Prabhupada had to engage brahmanas, engage local brahmanas for costly yagyas. And as I said, the local brahmanas refused to eat the prasadam cooked by the white disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And then Srila Prabhupada said, well, these people are not interested in the spiritual aspect of this temple. They are interested of taking over this temple, and because they want the donations. That's what he said. So he doesn't really have nice words for these people. He was not very appreciative. He calls such people unintelligent. So yes, unintelligent is a harsh word, but given the fact that this would not be directly read by the people involved, because they wouldn't read his books anyway, and it would be only read outside of Vrindavan mostly. Yeah, he could make such a statement, and it is a very powerful statement. He said, we would simply have performed Sankirtan. So because that is sufficient, that is the actual yajña for today, the Sankirtan yajña. So you don't need to spend a lot of money. You don't need to have a huge Bollywood star-studded ceremony in order to make actual spiritual progress. You can have simple Sankirtan, simple chanting of the Maha Mantra. And furthermore, it says here in the purport, Srila Jiva Goswami says that although Sankirtan is sufficient for the perfection of life, the archana or worship of the deity must continue in order that the devotees may stay clean and pure. So it does not mean that Sankirtan is everything. We also have deity worship, and that is why Srila Prabhupada also made it a point to install deities. He did have installation ceremonies in Vrindavan in this way, which is mentioned here, very costly and very elaborate. In other parts of the world, it was very much simplified. There are videos of him installing the deities. It was much simpler. I heard that they really, what they did in Vrindavan took days even, and it was a big thing, and they had to use copper wires and tie the wire around the deities and connect everything, and then touch the different body parts of the deities to awake the life air inside the deities. And there are certain mantras. There are mantras to turn something material into something spiritual. You can offer your bhoga, and then the matter becomes spirit. And there are also mantras, probably the same mantras, that if you speak them backwards, then you can turn the spiritual into something material. That is what they do during deity installation. They invite the deity, or they invite the personality to reside in these deities, and they recite mantras in a certain way, so that the spiritual is given a form, so that it turns into something material. So by contact with the spiritual realm, we can become spiritual ourselves, just as by contact with or by chanting, by following the right process, you can also turn the spiritual into the material. And I will show you something. There is one analogy that Srila Prabhupada gives. He says that when you have an iron rod, if you have iron and you touch it to fire for a longer time, then the iron itself will become like fire itself. So that is what happens when we are constantly engaged in transcendental activities. So I'm showing you something. This is steel. Our steel is produced. Now this is steel that you see here, and it's glowing hot. It has the color of fire. It does have a shape, but yeah, you can see it's very, very hot. It looks like fire. And if you touch something to it, the steel will become like fire itself. If you touch something to the hot steel, whatever you touch, be it paper or wood, will light up and it will burn itself. So that is how we can also become spiritual, and one by associating with devotees, by not being too much in material association, by trying to get out of the modes of nature. It is mentioned in Bhagavad-gita 13:22, where Kṛṣṇa speaks about also about the modes of material nature. So we have 13:22, that is here. The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with the material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil among various species. So if you are in contact with material nature and the modes of nature, you will automatically be influenced by them. So in order for you to become free from the influence of material nature, you should be unattached to them and be in contact with spiritual things. There may be, of course, different spiritual activities, different spiritual aspects. And I've mentioned the ritualistic mindset on the rituals, the different ceremonies that exist. I once heard of a woman, I think a scholar of religion. She visited one of our temples somewhere, I don't know where, in some other country, and she was witnessing the whole morning program, which goes from 4:30 to 9 a.m. So that's 4.5 hours. And she was sitting there observing, taking notes. And well, when that thing came to its end, she asked one of the participants, so can you please explain all those rituals to me? And he said, oh, we don't have rituals. What rituals are you talking about? So she meant, of course, the arati, the singing, the bowing down, the dandavats, the guru puja, and so on, tulsi puja. So he understood, oh, ritual is something karma kanda. So there was a lack of, it was unsuccessful communication, because she referred to whatever we were doing as ritual, and she has the right to do so. You could call that ritual, but that person whom she talked to did not consider them rituals, because they were more than that. They are above rituals. So they are not just rituals. And so everything that we do, the deity installation and the big or small deity installation, the deity worship, the singing, the programs that we have, all of that is meant to support the actual yajña, the actual activity of our time, which is the chanting of the Maha Mantra. And we know that the Maha Mantra is composed of Krishna's names. So that means that we are in direct contact with Krishna because the names are not different from Krishna. And to conclude my lecture, I would like to show you something else. So you may know that Srila Prabhupada has given the analogy of water. He says that when you're thirsty and you chant water, 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 it will not quench your thirst. You will still be thirsty because water and the word water are different. Now I'm going to show you this. Some of you may know it. Those of you who have studied linguistics, maybe you may know this image. You can see here, this looks like a pipe. And at the bottom it says, "Ceci n'est pas une pipe." This is not a pipe. So you may wonder, so what is it? Is it a car, a banana, a lamp? No, it means this is not a pipe. And the second sentence that should go along with it, because that's some sort of enigma, it's supposed to make people think. But there is a second sentence that should that is not written here, and I don't think it's written on the original painting, but you see this and it makes you think. And the second sentence that should be there, which is the explanation, should be, "This is the image of a pipe." So this is not a pipe itself. What you're seeing is not a pipe. You are seeing the image of a pipe. So if I send you a picture of a banana, you will not be able to eat that image. You can lick your screen, it will not help. You will not satisfy your hunger. So if you happened to be a smoker and I sent you this picture, you would say, yeah, this is not a pipe, this is just an image. So if we have a name or a word, then yes, it would only be a name or a word. So, and very last point, and if we're already talking about linguistics, there is one of the many theories in linguistics says that when you speak, or certain words can be a meaningful action. So when I say, if I take someone here from the list of participants, for example, Dwarkadish, he's also joining us. Thank you very much. If I say, Dwarkadish, you are sentenced to 10 years in prison. So what does that do? That will not have any effect. He will be able to go out to the supermarket tomorrow and next week and next month also, and yeah, he will not be in prison, because what I said, these words are meaningless, because I am not qualified to say these words. I could stand at my window, open it, and yell out, "I hereby declare the Olympic Games opened." So they are not open because it's not the time for the Olympic Games. It's not the right place. It is not, I'm not a qualified person. I'm not a qualified person. So you need a certain qualification to perform a certain act. A judge needs to be a qualified judge. A civil registrar needs to be a civil registrar to administer or to hold a wedding ceremony. And I would need to be the president of a country or the ruler of a country that is hosting the Olympic Games to open them, and it would need to be the right time. So there is a certain qualification for making such statements or making such utterances, performative utterance, it's called in English. So if you want to perform a Vedic fire sacrifice, you will need to have the right qualification. That is why Srila Prabhupada, he said that the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies are not really what we should be doing, because you need to have the right qualification for them, and you need to pronounce everything very, very, very correctly. Otherwise, it could have an adverse effect. So, and with that, I will end the lecture and we can go to the question part. Now I see here there are 2 messages already in the chat box. So if you have more, 3 messages now. So if you have more questions, you can type them now, and you can also, of course, after that maybe ask your questions by unmuting yourselves. And the first question I'll take is the one by Amit, because it's the shortest one. Why are we talking so much about marriages in India? Why are we not talking about Krishna consciousness or the Gita? Well, I have not talked about marriages in India so much. I briefly mentioned it as an example. I did mention the Vedic sacrifices that Prabhupada mentions in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and that is also mentioned in the Bhagavad-gita. It says the yajña in the, or yajña, in the verse itself, in today's verse, yajñāyācarataḥ. It is referring to sacrifices, and it is, I just mentioned that in order to make clear that what we do is above sacrifices, and I hope I didn't talk too much about the Vedic sacrifice thing and the marriage thing, but it is one of the most common yajñas that you see nowadays. There are, of course, other yajñas, but yeah, it is not the process for today, and it's not the process for us, not the easiest process. Let's say you can still do that if you want to, but it's not the easiest process for all of humanity, because we are not necessarily qualified to have powerful yajñas with the right results. So next question by Deep Tanshu. One explanation may also be that according to Srila, what is it, to SPB, Srila Prabhupada probably it means, spiritual perfection is when one does pure devotional service to Krishna. This places one in pure transcendental consciousness that is not tainted with the material modes of nature. Such pure devotees surrender their will and work only for the pleasure of Krishna. Thus, such acts for the pleasure of Shyamasundara and his devotees should also bring further spiritual perfection, transcendence, and not just producing no karmic reactions. Yes, it is beyond karma-free food or karma-free actions. It is beneficial in a spiritual way because we can add spiritual credit, so to say, to our spiritual bank accounts, and that credit doesn't vanish. It is, I have unknowingly or semi-knowingly, I had some, I don't know, 100 something euros in an online account with some payment portal, and I didn't even really wanted to keep the money there, but I had to for various reasons, and I forgot about the money. And 1.5 years later, I saw that, oh my God, I still have money in that strange online account, and well, it has shrunk, it has diminished so much because the payment provider in some fine print has decided to take around 5 euros per month as a fee for the money, which is ridiculous. And so I have lost quite a lot of money just by not looking at that account. So if you have a spiritual account, so to say, that will not go away, it will not shrink. It can only grow, and it will not expire, so to say. And then there is a question, or actually it's just a comment by Vinuya Devidasi. Thank you very much for the profound lecture and the nice examples. Thank you for your service and the possibility to learn from you. Thank you very much for that nice comment. I also hope to learn from you. Then there is another comment. You mentioned how Arjuna received knowledge from Krishna. However, Arjuna isn't considered in the Charya in our parampara. Why is that? Is there any relation to Diksha or Shiksha lineage? Well, to put it briefly, I believe he is not necessarily an Acharya in our parampara. We have in the Bhagavad-gita somewhere in the front, there's a list of the most, how do you call it, most significant or meaningful acharyas in our parampara, and this is quite long. Introduction, there it is, the disciplic succession, 32 people in the list, which is probably blurred on your side, but I can tell you it says Kṛṣṇa, Brahma, Narada, Vyasa, etc., etc. It does not mention Arjuna. It's true. And in this list, which is mainly a shiksha list, it doesn't really mean that the transcendental knowledge has only been given to Arjuna. It is transcendental knowledge that has been given to others as well. And so that lineage that we have doesn't exclude the fact that Arjuna in some way is also an acharya for us, in the sense that he asks questions and that he has given us the great opportunity to learn something. So that is also part of the nature of transcendental action. It's not only that you benefit from it, but also others benefit from it. If you distribute prasadam, it is you who will get spiritual benefit, and also the people who get the prasadam. If you chant Hare Krishna sincerely and honestly and correctly in the right mindset, it will benefit a lot of people. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur even said that even if it's nam aparat, offenseful chanting, still people will have some spiritual benefit from it. It's still better, more transcendental than just, let's say, sending relief goods to a disaster-struck area, which of course is necessary because people need to maintain their bodies, they need to eat something. But yeah, they need to, they will also get spiritual benefit, which is eternal, not just temporary. Also the same, I once heard from someone who was talking about the benefits of prasadam, that actually not only those humans who eat it, but also the animals and the bacteria who get to eat prasadam. If a rat lives in the sewage system and you have some prasadam which is flushed down the drainage system, then the rat will eat some morsels of prasadam, will still make some spiritual benefit. And Amit rightly says, Acharya means a spiritual teacher. Arjuna was a Kshatriya, therefore not an Acharya. Correct, he was an Acharya, and as an Acharya, he was, as a Kshatriya, sorry. As a Kshatriya, he was told by Kṛṣṇa to fight, and that was his job, so to say. As I said in the beginning, the Bhagavad-gita establishes in the first section what do we need to know, and third chapter, what do we need to do, the duties and the occupation, and the chapter 4, how do we do it, which kind of consciousness should we have, and what kind of knowledge should we have. So Arjuna was taught by Kṛṣṇa to fight, and yeah, therefore he was not a diksha guru. He did not he did not award initiation to anyone. So he was a Kshatriya fighter, that is what he did, but also in some sense he is an acharya for us, in the sense that we learn from him, that he has given us the opportunity to learn because he asked all those questions. And then the reply to that, acharya actually means one who teaches through their example. So wouldn't he technically still be teaching through his example by fighting? Yes, he does. He follows Kṛṣṇa. He is Kṛṣṇa's friend, and he also follows what Kṛṣṇa says. So in some sense, he is an acharya, but he is not one of the, he is not part of our diksha lineage, so to say, as he didn't initiate disciples. But we can still learn via his, well, he didn't really give shiksha. It was Kṛṣṇa giving him instructions. So he received the instructions for the benefit of all. So in a certain way, he is, who is he was essential for us to learn that. And then, oh my God, more people are very very keen on writing in the chat box today. Vinuya writes that I do not remember it exactly. Kadamba Swami Maharaj answered to this question that there are two kinds of paramparas. The one relates to the guru-disciple relationship, which we find in the Bhagavad-gita. The other one, to which Arjuna belongs, relates to family succession, but I'm not sure. Maybe Janitai knows it better. Deep Tanshu writes, the dialogue was also documented in Mahabharata by Vyasadeva, who is in the parampara. So there is some, the benefit of that dialogue between Arjuna and Krishna is there. And then Vinuya Devi Dasi clarifies two lineages, parampara and sampradaya. Yes, Arjuna is not part of the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya that we refer ourselves to, but yeah, maybe somebody else has something to say. I've spoken a lot at length. I don't know if any of you maybe have a comment. You can unmute yourself still. There is a microphone icon somewhere in the corner of your screen, and you can click on that and then you can speak. You can. Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. I would just like to know briefly why Sankirtan movement or Sankirtan is proclaimed as Yajña, though there is like no fire sacrifice and there are no kind of offerings, material things are offered. But why Prabhupada mentioned or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mentioned it as a Yajña?
Thank you very much for that question. Yes, I think it's a yajna because it requires some effort. You need to do something. You need to act in a certain way. And yeah, it is something that is in some sense similar because the more qualified you are, the better the result. If you are chanting purely, you can have a very good result. But it also is the, how is that called? The Yuga Dharma of the Kali Yuga, which means that in Kali Yuga things are simplified to a certain extent so that we don't have to follow every single detail. The yajnas have offerings. You need to offer some grains and fruits and whatever. In the Sankirtan Yajna, you offer your time, your attention, you offer your voice maybe, or the attention of your mind. If you don't have a voice, some people cannot speak. They have to, or they can chant in their minds. That also counts. So that is a sort of yajna, and it's also in former times there was Vedic sacrifices were the yajna for the, what was it, Dvapara. We have the Satya Yuga, in which you have the meditation as Yuga Dharma. Then you have Dvapara Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, and then Kali Yuga. So, and you have different yajnas for different ages. You have the meditation, then you have the deity worship, you have the sacrifices. So the deity worship and the sacrifices, also to a certain extent meditation, they are all still there. But the main thing is the Sankirtan Yajna, which is, as I said, in a certain way a Yajna, because you offer yourself, so to say. And maybe somebody else has a comment or can elaborate on that. I know we're a bit above our time, but we still have 14 participants here, and they are all hopefully keen on hearing not just my opinion, but other people's opinions.
Hi, Bob.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say for the last question with the yajna, because it's an offering to Kṛṣṇa, right? So in that sense, Kṛṣṇa is very happy if we chant his name, and sometimes a parallel is given with with offering water of the Ganga to the Ganga. It's like, of course, Ganga is Ganga herself, and practically we cannot offer her something, but then we offer the water of Ganga to offer something to Ganga. And yeah, chanting Krishna's name is, of course, it's a purification for ourselves and for our heart, but at the same time, Krishna is very happy if we offer his name, and he's not different from his name. So we associate with Krishna, but also Krishna is very happy that we turn towards him and that we take shelter of his holy name and try to get to practically try to experience him by chanting the holy name. Yeah, just came to my mind.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Yeah, so going on in this topic, actually, yajna, I mean, from in the Vedic times was different, right? You had a lot of rituals that you have talked about today, that there were so many rituals and different ways to do the rituals. And usually it was always in front of a fire, you know, to purify. But there are lots of yogis who go up into the Himalayas and they do not offer. Yajna, or yajña is not really a sacrifice. It is a sacrifice is part of a bigger thing. You know, you sacrifice because of something. You don't just sacrifice. So yajña is actually an act of devotion rather than a sacrifice. So when you do the kirtan, or even if you do a dhyan, you know, you meditate on Kṛṣṇa or whatever, you meditate on spiritual, that itself can be considered a yajña because you are in devotion. So yajña actually means towards a devotion, and in the devotion you also sacrifice, but you can sacrifice with devotion. That becomes a yajña. That's my opinion.
Thank you very much. Yes, you offer something, and yeah, for some people it is the strict following of all the different rituals. That is why Prabhupada mentions in the Bhagavatam purport that I read that there are smarta brahmanas. So in the smarta lineage, they don't stress devotion so much, I believe. It's more the following of certain rituals, and if you do this and this and this, then you will get this and this result automatically. So of course you need to have some dedication in order to follow through with that. But yes, yajña actually is a sacrifice in some way. So sacrifice can be in the form of a fire. Sacrifice can also be in the form of penance, maybe. So yeah, thank you very much for that. So I would request you, if you have one question, then we can still do that, but we are very much almost over our time, not very much, but 9 minutes. So we might have a bit of time for one question or brief remark, comment, anything. So if there is no other question, I will just very, very briefly share my screen again so that we can have a sneak, how do you call that, sneak peek, a preview of next week's verse, which will be spoken about by Sutapa Prabhu. So this is a person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. So that is also, here we have the yajña mentioned. So this is continuing everything that, continuing, of course, the 4th chapter, and continuing also, especially today's verse, a very interesting verse. And we are very keen on hearing Sutapa Prabhu next week. And as I've said, Tulsi and Pandava the week after that. And in 3 weeks, it will be Sanatani. So we are looking forward to that. And we're very glad that you all joined us tonight. Thank you very much. And well, Hare Krishna and have a good night. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.